Hello, and welcome to our continuing devotional through Colossians. Today we're in Colossians 3, starting in verse 22 and going through chapter 4, verse 1, and here's what those verses say. Bondservants, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving the Lord Christ. For the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrong he has done, and there is no partiality. And masters, treat your servants justly and fairly, knowing that you also have a master in heaven. So when I look at these verses, I want to look at them with the nearest equivalent in our culture. Some of your translations might talk about slaves and masters, or bondservants and masters. But I think the nearest equivalent in American culture would be employers and employees. Slavery in ancient times was different than the kind of slavery we kind of think of from Civil War, pre-Civil War era. But it still had the potential for abuses. And probably the closest thing you could say is slavery in ancient times was very close to what you might see in the military today, where there was commanders, there was officers, and there was the soldiers under them, and what was expected of both. So I just want to give you a clear picture of what this was like. But the best way for most of us who are not in the military and certainly don't live in a slavery culture today to look at this and understand this is applying it to the employer-employee relationship. So he starts with the employee, the bondservant, the one who's under someone else's authority in the vocational world. He says, listen, obey in everything those who are your earthly masters. Again, everything not meaning illegal things or immoral things or ungodly things, but rather just speaking of in generalities. Don't make life hard. Don't just be somebody who's an eye servant or a people pleaser, which means I'll do the right thing when the boss is looking or when the boss is in the office, but when he's gone or she's gone and they're not looking, then I'm just going to do my own thing and not follow the orders or the structure or the policies that they have given me. But rather, we're going to do the right thing, not because we fear them, but because we fear the Lord, because we want to please God. And ultimately, all of our work, as it says in verse 23, we work heartedly. We work with all our effort as for the Lord and not for men. We're not really doing it for men or women or whoever the boss may be. We're doing it because God is honored by those who work hard and give their all, knowing, it says in verse 24, that you will receive the inheritance as your reward from the Lord. You are serving the Lord Christ. Now, readily admit, sometimes you can be the best employee, do everything you're supposed to do, and be unappreciated and not paid fairly. That happens. But it never happens that God doesn't see it and God doesn't reward it. He's always just. And therefore, our focus is not on do good work and work hard because the boss will reward you for that. Rather, work hard, do everything right because God sees it. He's pleased with it and he will honor it. But if you do wrong, God's not going to say, well, that's okay. That boss did you wrong anyways. He says, no, the wrongdoer will be paid back, verse 25, for the wrong he has done. And there's no partiality. God's not going to sit there and say, you get a pass. You're allowed to steal merchandise. You're allowed to pad the expense account. You're allowed to not do your work and somehow you're going to get away with it. No, God's not partial. He's not unfair. If you do wrong, you're going to pay for that wrong. Now, of course, there's not just employees, there's employers. There's people who are in charge. They have that authority. And he says here in verse 25, he says, masters, treat your bondservants, your employees, justly and fairly, knowing that you have a master in heaven. If every boss remembers that they have to answer to God one day for how they treat their employees, life's going to be different. Did you pay them fairly? Did you verbally treat them right? Did you understand their position? Were you there for them and helpful when they were going through maybe a child's sickness? How did you treat your employees is something you're going to answer for with God one day. So hopefully you and I will consider these things, and whether we're employer or employee or somewhere in between, we will honor God in all of it and treat people the right way, trusting that God will take care of the rest. Have a blessed day.